I want to welcome our very special guests. We have Andrew Kim and Cherlyn and Courtney Hoskins. Hi. Stay away. Got to be careful of feedback. It's like a.
Stand in the corner.
Yeah, you can say, or you can say. So, as I said, the occasion for this program was partly wanting to show Instant Life in LA because it's brand new. You guys worked on it for a while. And it's like, wow, we gotta finally show this thing. And I immediately thought, well, maybe it would be fun to kind of put together a program themed around this idea of biogenesis. And on top of that, to make sure that all the films were made in 16 millimeter, because I started thinking a lot about, if you read my kind of like over-the-top program notes on it, there were these thoughts running through my head about the medium of film, of 16 millimeter in particular, which all of you worked extensively in. And on top of that, so Courtney, you used to also work in film lab at one point. Andrew, you've like taught filmmaking and you've done a lot of hands-on filmmaking stuff. Cherlyn, you're a projectionist. Actually, I have to say, Cherlyn was my projectionist for my class that I teach at Cal Arts for like 3 semesters, I think. And this is the first time I've shown something of yours, like with you in the audience. Did I do okay? Okay, good. But I wondered if each of you could say a little bit about what drew you initially to film, and maybe in particular 16 millimeter film.
I guess I'll start because I have the microphone. Let's see, what initially drew me to film is a really long question, but I was kind of a student, but also a projectionist for Stan Brackage at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And he taught a class on independent women filmmakers. And so I thought I would like sign up for the class thinking like, oh, we're gonna be watching like Jane Campion movies. And it was experimental films, and it was my first experience with experimental films, and he needed a projectionist, so I volunteered, and we just became really good friends. And he had a Sunday film salon every Sunday where he would have, we'd all go out and have Mexican food, and then we'd go take over one of the classrooms and watch experimental films. And so I got just familiar with the concepts of like step printing and all of like the hand-painted films and stuff like that. And I got a really good education, even though I was never a film studies student. And then, yeah, I moved to New York and I worked at a film lab where we did a lot of optical printing, contact printing. We were just starting to get into digital scanning of things and digital stuff, but yeah, so I had access to film stock and printers and everything that I could have wanted, and I just kind of went nuts with it.
I think the thing that originally drew me to film as a filmmaker was kind of a rejection of working on or with a computer. So much of my life before working with film, and still remains, I have to engage with the computer a great deal, but I do like the tactility of working with 16 millimeter film, and also some of the magic that you can do in a very practical way, some of which you see in this film in camera without any sort of digital compositing or trickery that happens, that can happen digitally, which is also great. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but I like kind of some of the more sculptural, hands-on nature of making something happen in the real world and being able to record it on something that you can also cut up and touch and manipulate in different ways. I'll pass the mic.
I don't know, I went to Cal Arts for my BFA and MFA, so at first I didn't decide I want to work with film or digital. I kind of embraced digital at first for my BFA, so I made a few video work, and then when I was in third year BFA, I think film production is one of the required class, and I think I took class with Andrew, so he's actually my teacher. And so, and then after that, I decided I wanted to go to MFA at Cal Arts because I want to learn more about film, because I feel like I'm really interested in this like intimate contact with the material. And so I wanted to study with Charlotte Price and Betty Bromberg, and so I applied, and then they accepted me. And so I decided I want to work on film more, and so now I'm still working on film.
I was thinking about your film because you made a series of 4 films about the Galilean satellites of Jupiter, but Europa, this is the moon where we have evidence that there potentially was some kind of life, or I don't know, do we have definitive evidence on that yet? Or no, not quite. But there's potential evidence of actual life, or at least the possibility of life, and which is one of the reasons I included that film of the 4 in this program tonight. But I really love how you then interweave the material with the jellyfish and stuff like that at the end. And I'm wondering, first of all, if you could talk a little bit about what it is we're even seeing in the first, say, 2/3 of the film, because it's a little mysterious, I think, and a little bit of the process, if you don't mind. But then also maybe some of the underlying ideas I'm really curious about, since the show is about biogenesis. I was thinking about the origins of life, and in what way were you thinking about that when you were making this?
Yeah, so that series of film was actually about working with Stan, because he was such a giant. So the Galilean satellites are the 4 largest moons of Jupiter, and so Stan was kind of our Jupiter, and because there was a group of us that were kind of always in his orbit, and Jupiter and the moons around it, the bigger moons, are constantly like pulling and twisting each other when they get near each other, and that's where the idea of the ocean under Europa comes from, is that it should just be a ball of ice, but because of all the tidal forces and everything, there should be an ocean. Actually, like a couple others, they're thinking too, Ganymede and Callisto could potentially have like salty oceans underneath them. But as for what it is, like I just like I feel weird, like it's actually dish soap. So I'm like animating dish soap with my fingerprints. For the first part of it, and I'm shooting it like basically dish soap is birefringent, so it behaves like a liquid crystal. So if you shoot it under the right conditions, you can really like pull a lot of colors out of it. It like twists and refracts colors in different ways. So the idea was kind of like drilling down into the ice and getting into the gooey parts where you'd find the creatures underneath. And that was actually shot on Super 8 in the Denver Aquarium. Where it was like a noisy little camera, and everyone was really fascinated. They kept wanting to they were like, is that a video camera? Like, no, it's not. So yeah, that was the idea kind of behind that one. And Io, I think all 4 of them, they think there could be life there. Like Io is the volcanic one, but we're finding more and more life on Earth that could exist in such an extreme environment. So they're still like my favorite things. And so you can go out, and if you have just a basic set of binoculars or a little telescope, you can actually see them. They're called the Galilean satellites because that's how Galileo discovered that there are things in orbit around Jupiter, and Jupiter's kind of in orbit around not us, but the sun. But they're in different positions every night. You can kind of like see them next to Jupiter.
So pleased that's dish soap. That's fantastic, because also you have at least one other film where you used makeup actually.
Yeah.
Like the Countergirl trilogy, where you're using like makeup that has liquid crystals in it and stuff. So this idea of like ordinary materials that can substitute for quite like grandiose, cosmic, complex.
Yeah,
things.
I like to make really cool things out of basic like stuff you just throw in the trash, and it's all transparent until you like do the right things to it. So.
Well, and that can't help but connect then to the film that you guys made, because a lot of, I know, what went into that project is an interest in illusionism of filmmaking. And I mean, like you have a couple of the reveals, let's say, like in the later part of the film, but Yeah, I mean, could you say a little bit about where this project came from, at least, or in particular in terms of that kind of cinematic illusionism you were interested in?
Yeah, of course, but also to just rewind on the conversation we were just having, there's a kind of vague pseudo-scientific understanding that the first single-cell organisms, in fact, were kind of predated by various forms of crystalline growth. So that's something that, in fact, we were thinking about in the creation of some of these images, or I should say that the original filmmaker who made Instant Life was thinking about in the initial conception of the film. That is the idea that the primordial soup may or may not have been the result of these growing crystals. But to answer your question, yeah, the film definitely has an interest, it would seem, in various forms of practical special effects, which are you know, very, very simple things, as you were saying, can be as simple as dish soap or makeup. In our case, you know, a fish soap, also, fish tank, dish soap, and a little bit of salt create a lot of the clouds that you see throughout the film. That in combination with putting a small rock closer to the camera than, say, a background image, you get, you know, the at least visual illusion that that rock is quite large. So one of the most beautiful things about practical special effects is the kind of magic that happens right in front of the camera, or as a result of some sort of mechanical process derived from how, you know, film moves through the camera. Is that your question? Yeah. Cherlyn, do you want to say?
Well, I wanted to ask Cherlyn also a little bit about process. I'm not trying to get you to reveal secrets here, you know, dish soap notwithstanding, I guess, but I want to ask you, I mean, like I said, we just talked about Bilicons, and that actually, the film took about 9 years for Daina Krumins to make, and all of the effects you see are all analog. It's all optical compositing, really laborious process. And in your film, there's obviously a lot of labor involved as well. And there's some quite fantastic images, and I'm wondering on what level was there like a certain amount of discovery or surprise in creating these images or pursuing these images? You know, I think the great thing about film is often there's a dynamic between control and lack of control that can be actually quite exciting. And I'm imagining that some of that played into your process.
Yeah, there are a lot of discoveries in this film. At that time, I was taking a class called optical printing, and so I was learning how to operate the optical printer. For those of you who are not familiar with optical printer, it's a giant machine, and then you have like, you know, one side you have the original material, and then you have like the camera you load on exposed film, and then you have a kind of a operator that you enter the command, and then to tell what to do to reproduce your material. So I was very fascinated by this technology and this giant machine, and I'm interested in reproduction and recreation of my original material. And so it's a lot of labor, but because in order to operate this machine, to learn faster and more and deeper, I have to find a way to not work with lab. So I have to hand process every time I make a test. So in order to do that, I have to be more economical in my process. So I learned I don't want to process reverse negative. I want to process negative film, but I can't make a print because I don't want to send out to the lab. So I print it and then I process negative as negative and then print it again to get the positive or something like that. And so I learned negative equal positive, right? And I can always just dump into the developer and a fixer and I'm done. Like 10 minutes, I get whatever I just shot. And so I learned that process like maybe 100 times to get the best temperature in the development and then the best exposure. And then for the color parts, the same thing. I don't want to work with lab. So I ordered Agfa reversal film, which I think is discontinued, right? I don't know. Anyway, I ordered it from Canada, and then they limit, if you are ordered outside of Canada, you can only get 500 feet at a time. And so I ordered twice, and then to get a 10 reel, 100 feet, and I told myself, that's the limit I can work with for this film. And so this is the same thing, I work with optical printer, and then I put into the developer. So develop 1, developer 2, fix, I'm done. And so I just learned that. And then there's a lot of labor in the filter optical printer too. So when you see all the colors I made myself with different filters like cyan, magenta, and yellow, and a lot of ND involved. So I advanced one frame, and then I put the combination of the filters and NDs, and then advanced one frame and put different filters and ND. And I did that for, I don't know, thousands of frames.
I mean, every one of your films, but also just everything in the program, I think. Part of our pleasure in looking at this kind of stuff is, on some level, maybe partly subconsciously being aware of how much went into it, how much creativity and work and engagement, I think. But does anybody have any questions? It shouldn't be just me and this kind of stuff. It's dark too, I can't see you. I know, what can you ask, right? Yeah.
Is Instant Life a real film, or did you make all that up?
I'm a big softie. If my collaborators were here, they would continue the ruse, but a lot of it is made up. But my collaborators are real. They're real. Those are real people.
And they're going to be pissed when I tell them.
They're going to be real pissed when Mark tells them. But yeah, we did the screening that Mark was talking about, and I almost gave away the secret, with the first question. And I'm bad at this kind of thing. But, yeah. Yeah. The idea that this is film that exists, that is a recreation of recreation of recreation, fabricated. Yeah. Sorry.
For Instant Life, how did you think through the score, the musical score?
A lot of it is film soundtracks that are processed in multiple ways, particularly by granularizing it, slowing it down, kind of treating the sound in the same way that the imagery is treated, kind of creating different time scales by which to analyze snippets of audio, of sound, stretching things out, smushing things, in the same way that perspectively the imagery is doing the same thing.
I'm really curious about the diagram you included at the end of your film with all these correlations and circles. I wonder if you could speak about that.
Yeah, so this film deals with symbolism, basically, because it started with a dying dragonfly that I picked up off the ground, and then I just thought, oh, this dragonfly is so beautiful, but I can't remember when was the last time I saw a real, live dragonfly. And then I saw all the details in the wings, and then I was like, oh, I really want to preserve this in order to film this. But that thought scared me too. I was like, oh my God, I'm being, human being. I want to preserve everything, and we use a lot of preservatives in the food and, GMO, anything. And so I criticized myself in that thought. But then I was just thinking about the environment, the environment we share with the fly. So when you see the flipping, that kind of mirroring thing, one side is the fly and the other side is a body, human body. So I'm trying to express this environment. It's like a mirror where we share the same environment. What happened to it eventually happened to us. And also I'm just, from that thought, it's basically in the end, the diagram is the streaming of thought that I had. And during the whole process, starting with I want to preserve that fly. Yeah, and then I start to think about, like human being created a lot of things. I'm trying to improve our life, but then it somehow damaged the environment. And so I was thinking about the fly and thinking about we wanted to fly, and so then we invented aircraft, but then somehow led to some kind of tragic wars, something like that. And then the whole film is a meditation of how to balance this damage and creation. So in the end, you see the sound and an image is a chain of thoughts. Revolves the life and death, the thinking.
Did the picture come first, or the film?
Which picture?
The diagram.
Well, diagram was actually I created in the end, but I think I had it when I created the film. Yeah.
Like in a notebook.
Yeah, like
Anybody else? Yeah.
What was so you mentioned you were using dish soap under centralized lights to create all that texture. What was the process of working with that light? Were you shooting frame by frame or different, like changing the lights as you go? What was the sound?
So I actually animated that in the optical printer, like as the film was running through, I was doing the soap. Thought my boss was probably going to kill me for doing that, but it was a big mess. But basically what I'm doing is I'm using cross-polarizing filters. And so, liquid crystals have special properties that they can like twist a light wave as the light goes through it. So you've got the like say vertical waves going in, and then it hits the liquid crystal, it goes through the polarizer, it hits the liquid crystal and it twists it to the different colors in the spectrum. Then it goes through the second cross polarizer, which is horizontal. So most of the time when you do that, when you cross polarizers, you don't get anything. Like if you look at the gas pump with polarizing sunglasses on, it's black. But these liquid crystal forms can actually like twist the light and get it through the little prism that it's in. So in order to kind of manipulate the colors, I was just directly manipulating the optical printer, the lights in the printer. Like I had like, all of this was kind of like laid out on a dope sheet, and I knew like when to kind of change it and when I wanted the warm colors and the cold colors and when I really wanted to get like the multicolors that were in there. So I'm also using like filters, both inside and outside of the little polarized prism that I make for this like, so it's really complicated, but like basically what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like twisting the light out of the plastics, essentially, and ruining a $20,000 optical printer in the process.
Did you really?
No, I didn't ruin it, but yeah, I came in on the weekend so we wouldn't see the mess, because I knew it was going to be a mess.
Were there any unexpected connections you found in the films while you were curating them, outside of like what line you were expecting to draw between them?
I'm so flattered to be asked a question. Thank you.
It's a beautifully curated program.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. There always are. Like, because I tend to program at least semi-intuitively. It comes from maybe years ago being a college radio DJ for a couple of years maybe, and just thinking a lot about music and mixtapes and things maybe. I mean, 2 decades ago, but Yeah, I don't know. On some level, films came to mind. Like the first one I thought of was Babobilicons to include in reference to Instant Life, and then I thought of Courtney's, and I thought of Cherlyn's, and yeah, these things just kind of popped into my head, and I made a list, and then it's partly conscious, partly not, I suppose. I think that in some ways that can make the best program when you're not absolutely sure about every connection that you're deliberately drawing, but instead you're leaving open the chance that, because also I don't get to see the program until I'm here with you all, and yeah, I really liked it. So I hope you did too. Yeah, no, thanks for asking. It's kind of hard to answer because it's semi-intuitive for sure. Yeah.
One more question for you, Mark.
Okay.
What's the story with the guy, David?
Oh yes, Guy David is one of the most remarkable people I've ever known. Actually, he's his name was originally Dennis Pease. He went to CalArts in the early '70s as an animation student. After having been shot and injured in Vietnam, actually, and animation and art for him then in the time after that became very therapeutic. And actually, a lot of his film, pretty much all of his films, have on some level some kind of psychic therapy dimension to them. And Ora Corona was very much about this kind of like emerging consciousness and this creation of a new being. And I mean, it's a counterpart with another film called Luma Nocturna, which is all dark colors and like a black background and pastels and stuff. A really gorgeous film. And then Ora Corona is this almost totally white film, and so they're kind of these polar opposites of each other. But he's just a completely remarkable person. He does he does therapy work now with his wife, a couple hours from here. He's made a bunch of independent animations. He's a really, really interesting guy. I had hoped he would be here tonight actually, but they're in the process of moving, and so he couldn't make it. But yeah, he's something though. Any other final questions? Yeah.
Yeah, with Instant Life, I just wonder on like the three beginnings and three ends, and there are three collaborators, right? And three films. So I don't know, do you have anything with that beginnings and ends, and I don't know, do you want to talk about it or reveal something? I don't know.
The notion of threes?
And the false beginning of the middle and if you want to say something. You don't have
the program kind of describes some of the mythology, or rather the notes describe some of the mythology, but the kind of real world understanding of things just involves the idea that we had a bunch of footage, and we began to realize that we could take that footage and with it create three distinct films that shared certain characteristics but also did different things to kind of articulate what the film was about or what the film could be about. And so it was, I think, a unique way of dealing with a lot of footage that we didn't really know what to deal with, but also, as one does when they're making this kind of film, find a way to make it work. Which I think is also one of the beautiful things about working with film, something I was thinking about when you were talking, Cherlyn, and also, which is the idea that you don't really know what you're going to get until you have it processed and you look at it, and then you have to find a way to make sense of it, no matter how much you plan. I think that's also, going back to your first question, one of the things that I like about it is that you don't know until you see it. It's very different than working with something like video. But I hope that answers your question. Not so in a meaningful way.
I could have called this program "You Don't Know Until You See It."
You don't know until you see it. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys very much for being here and sharing your work, and thank you.